In today's video, I shall talk about Kaiser Wilhelm I's proclamation of the founding of the German Empire. The date of this proclamation is 18th of January 1871. It is not a speech, but an extremely important piece of document. It was the official announcement that united other German states into a single entity, whereby Wilhelm I declares himself the German Emperor. The introduction to this proclamation is that the southern German states, including Bavaria, Baden, and Württemberg, which had joined Prussia in the war already against France, have agreed to join the states, the North German Confederation, to form a German empire. And they asked Wilhelm I, already King of Prussia and President of the Northern Confederation, to assume the imperial crown, although there is much more to that, which I will explain later. In the background to this proclamation was the long road it took to actually get to the German Empire. The wars of reunification, which included the wars with Austria and the wars with Denmark, first consolidated the power of Prussia inside of the German states, but also expelled Austria from any future Germany. And more about the victory of Germany in the Franco-German War. When the proclamation was made, Paris was already encircled, and the declaration was made at the Palace of the Versailles, which presumably was to add insult to injury, although these details were not actually mentioned in the proclamation, but one could infer from the historical background and also the intent of the place of the proclamation. And it was in fact, at first, the French aggression, which was incited by Bismarck's manipulation of the Spanish throne, that had triggered the mutual defense treaty that Prussia had with southern German states, which became the catalyst for the eventual German national reunification. And in the Franco-German War, the technical and tactical superiority of the Germans, led by General Moltke, who was able to mobilize a larger number of troops effectively over long distances, earned him important victories, such as those at Sedan. And let's dive deeper into the proclamation itself. It is obviously a public proclamation intended for everyone to see, and other world powers and important leaders would pay close attention to this historic event. However, the tone of the proclamation was neither pomp nor arrogant, and did not really make an effort to show off or romanticize such an important event. What it did was simply briefly address the facts that the German states would be united as one, headed by Prussia, whose king and his descendants would be named emperor ever since. And the image of many people might be of glittering princes, shining medals, and glorious ceremonies at the proclamation. However, the background and the more important, people might actually be the gray-suited civilian legislators that made this empire possible in the first place. And there's a really contrasting image that, at this new age of the late 19th century, that the masses and universal suffrage and democracy itself, the middle class have been rising since industrialization. And the proclamation itself is just two short paragraphs, which understandably had omitted a lot of important information. For one, it did not explicitly mention the location, which is the Palace of Versailles, and its significance. And it did not explain why that the German Empire itself was not actually founded inside of Germany. And the reason being that the Kaiser and Bismarck did not really want the ceremony to take place inside of Berlin, because it might dissolve and shatter the illusion that German states would be equal inside of the empire. Nor do they want to take the ceremony to take place in other cities such as Frankfurt that went against the Prussian leadership in the past and incited painful memories of the revolutions of 1848. And the date of 18 January was chosen for the proclamation because it is very significant. On that day, it was the 170th anniversary of the coronation of Frederick the Great, which signifies the importance of Prussia, actually, how they dominated this empire for the years to come. And in the proclamation itself, the Kaiser mentioned the reestablishment of the empire, referring to the First Empire, which was the Holy Roman Empire. But I will talk more about later how different these two empires actually are. And the proclamation focused on the absence of an emperor for 60 years, referring to when Napoleon invaded and dissolved the Holy Roman Empire and replaced it with the Confederation of the Rhine in 1806. The Kaiser said in the proclamation that we owe a duty to the entire fatherland to reunify Germany, which appeals to the collective patriotism of the originally separated Germanic peoples to unite as one. However, it is interesting that in the document, the Kaiser still referred to Germany as a federation. Perhaps it is because that the constitution, even of the newly founded German Empire, so follows closely that of the Northern German Confederation. And more about actually the day. On the day of the proclamation, there was no actual crown that was placed on top of Wilhelm I's head, nor was there ever a crown that was, that the Kaisers, after Wilhelm, they actually did not have any single crowns over the course of the entire empire. This is perhaps because that Europe was still living under the shadow of Napoleon and was very sensitive to these sorts of actions and these sorts of the implications that it might mean to have an actual crown. And Bismarck was actually the architect behind the entire empire, from the Warsaw Unification to actually, the entire proclamation itself. But Wilhelm I was actually reluctant to become emperor, and Bismarck was the chief imposer behind, actually sort of forcing the Kaiser to accept the title of emperor, because the Wilhelm looked to other royal families in Europe and did not want to be like them. And on the day of the proclamation, Wilhelm actually told Bismarck that today we are carrying the old Prussia to the grave. So he probably preferred the old Prussia and the old arrangement and was reluctant to become the head of the empire. And over the entire course of the establishment of the empire, Wilhelm probably had far less say than what he appeared to have demonstrated in the proclamation. 1 month earlier, even before the proclamation, the Reichstag of the Northern Confederation already asked Wilhelm to take up the imperial crown. And the reality was probably less than glorious. For example, Bismarck bribed King Ludwig of Bavaria for 5 million thaler beforehand for him to recognize Wilhelm as the emperor. While we have to say that in that period of time, the fervent patriotic feelings of the public had reached a new height, which pressured all the states of Germany, especially the southern states which were still independent, to join the empire. And the nobility also agreed, which was the second estate. And Bismarck admitted himself that he was navigating modern nationalism, which was a very, very different kind of thing. As in a world of imperialism, Germany could no longer survive peacefully in its own corner and must embrace the idea of imperialism and the things that it would come from it. And at the end of the document, the Kaiser mentioned the ancient splendors, okay, which obviously refers to the ancient times, which are the Holy Roman Empire. But the Holy Roman Empire was actually the very antithesis of the new founded German Empire, as they were very, very different. For one, the Holy Roman Empire, in its last 500 years, was actually dominated by the Habsburgs, and it was consisted of many autonomous and religious entities, and it was sort of, the continuation, as they believe, of the ancient Roman Empire. But the newly founded German Empire was a very nationalistic, it was purely German, and it was a modern empire. So it was very, very different from the old empire. And 10 days after this proclamation was made, a truce was signed between Germany and the newly founded French Republic. And this was followed by the Frankfurt Treaty in May, where France had to give up Alsace-Lorraine and had to pay 5 billion francs in indemnity. Germany was a clear victor in the biggest European war since Napoleon Bonaparte, and by reunifying the nation immediately afterwards, Germany sends a strong signal to the likes of Britain and Russia that she has risen to be a dominant rival power. Indeed, Schultz, in his book Germany, A New History, agrees that Germany has become a nation-state in the center of Europe, and this empire would last for many more decades until the First World War. And this proclamation indeed signifies the beginning of the empire in a very formal way. Thank you very much.